Long time ago,
in the 16th and 15th century.
Since the Renaissance epoch had just finished, people started changing their thoughts, having new questions about the earth and about different scientific discoveries, and they got an adventurous and curious spirit for doing more things, like the exploration of new routes for arriving into the Indies.
After 2 months of traveling, they found land. They thought they were in the Indies and misnamed the natives as Indians. After, they realized that they were not in the Indies because they saw that the natives looked different.
The Europeans also noticed that they needed some resources from America, so they put the Indians to work, but they didn't resist to the European diseases and the treatment they got. As this was happening, Europeans began bringing Africans and enslaved them. In this way, the Atlantic slave trade appeared. The Atlantic slave trade consisted on buying, selling, and transporting of Africans into America as slaves. Europeans brought Africans because they weren't able to escape because their dark color made them recognizable in the society and because they didn't know the territory. They were also brought because they were strong and they resisted to the diseases that Indians didn't resist, and they had an advanced knowledge in agriculture.
This slave trade was part of another one called the Triangular Trade, which was a transatlantic trading network in which goods and slaves were transported between America, Africa, Europe, and West Indies. Another trading pattern was the Columbian Exchange, which consisted in the exchange of goods, animals, diseases, plants, traditions, and ideas. This exchange was between America and Europe.
Without the Middle Passage, nothing of these patterns would have been able to happen, because this passage was the voyage between the West and America. Getting back to the Atlantic slave trade, we know that one of its main effects was that capitalist system received more sources that allowed it to work. But what is capitalism?
Capitalism is an economic and political system based on private ownership, in which the society entrusts its economic process to private businessmen. This means that this economic system depends on private companies to gain profit. Capitalist societies also include the production by private initiative for private profit. People gain what they can afford. Private companies that produce different goods own their profit. They decide what to do with it. These new trade patterns brought mainly bad consequences to the African society and that continent. This was because most of the times the Africans that were brought to America were the strongest ones and the ones that looked with a better shape for working as slaves, and they also brought women that helped at the houses and as servants and as slaves. This caused that many families were separated, but it also caused the spread of black culture and population. Nowadays, thanks to the Atlantic slave trade, almost every country in America has a big population of African descendants, which form an important part of the country. Also caused the mixture of different races, including the Indians, the Spanish and other Europeans, and the Africans. And it also helped the African rulers to separate different groups that were in disagreement by sending one group to America and leaving the other in Africa. The reasons that encouraged trading during the 17th and 18th centuries were the same as the ones that move global trade nowadays. These reasons are: the countries with greater trading or exportation levels are the countries with more power politically and economically. Countries which have large territories that allow exploitation of any resource are able to sell it or to sell different products made with it to other countries, and in this way earn profit. But the difference between American and Japan's and China's trade is that China and Japan made an isolation policy in which the countries that wanted to trade with them had to follow and accomplish some rules. For this reason, they were able to keep their culture and beliefs, and they were forced to make their own industries that after some time made them get highly industrialized. But what would happen if a country establishes an isolation policy nowadays?
The policy wouldn't benefit the country because nowadays resources are really scarce and very important part of our daily life.
So if a country establishes the isolation and it needs a resource that is getting over or that the country can produce, the isolation will affect the country because it won't be able to get that resource. Also, if the country establishes the policy, it would make internal conflicts because there would be people that would disagree with the idea of being isolated. The following map shows the number of barrels of oil consumed in the world.
This map shows the top oil producers in barrels per day. The next map shows the flow of oil merchandise,
or the oil movement. Oil is the most important source of energy in the world. By trading oil, the country gets power and economic profit. Oil is basic for life nowadays. It's used for transportation, electricity, cosmetics, medicine, clothing, etc. Oil is used every day.
Countries always look for power, and gaining power requires the possession of a large economic resource.
The exploitation of oil brings some positive and negative consequences. The economical consequences are: people that own the land in which the oil is located will benefit from the money that she gains when the oil is sold. Also, while the poor people spend their money for getting the resource, in this case oil, the rich people that own the oil will become even richer with the poor money. If there is a large exploitation of oil, the country will gain economic profit because the oil will be sold later on, as it is one of the most important resources in the country.
The political consequences are: people that own the lands will have more power, while the ones who have to pay to them for the use of oil will have less or none power. If the country has a large amount of hydrocarbons, it will be easier for the country to establish relationships between different countries.
The social consequences are: the people that have the money to get oil will be in a higher social status, while the ones that cannot pay for the oil will be discriminated and would be in the lower social status. So people with a low social status will have less power than the ones that can afford oil. This is why this is a problem, because people need oil.
Environmental. If the hydrocarbon exploitation is being done with responsibility, the environmental impact should be minimum. However, there are situations where accidents could affect the environment in an important way. An example is the recent accident in the Gulf of Mexico, in which a petroleum drag producer operated by BP, British Petroleum Company, generated a huge oil spill which contaminated a really large zone of the sea, decreasing the economic activities of this place, fishing, tourism, among others. This situation harmed the environment, including the animals and plants in this zone. Accidents might occur, such as the spill of oil that happened in the Gulf of Mexico. This caused worries and discussion among the countries. What we would do in this case is to improve the policies regarding to the care of political limits and the private barriers that should be respected in order to avoid problems.
The solutions that we suggest for the ecological impact are to undertake the companies to reforestate or clean the area used with a careful process that assures that it won't damage more the place previously used.
Social. Most of the social conflicts or problems are caused because of the limits with homes or environmental places important to the community, culturally, touristically, or economically. The solution will be to undertake companies to notify people who live on the surroundings of the place that is going to be affected about the procedure that is going to happen and the specific area that's going to be affected. Companies should also record all damages previously done to their properties for avoiding false accusations against the companies and to leave a distance between the project and the home places.
In conclusion, people who own this resource, oil, are investing on its excavation, exploitation, and production. The government doesn't support the companies, what means that they can do anything they want with those lands that are bought by them. The production and distribution of the product is part of the company's tasks. The profit that they end with will only be managed by the company's owner, and they are able or decide what to do with it. This is related with capitalism because capitalism, or its purpose, is to generate profit, what is done by the companies that have the oil.